So, how long have you lived here?
Oh my gosh. Is it time? I think it's time. Do we hit the thing? There we go. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is Jeff Fritz, and today we're gonna be yeah. Don't announce the date on these streams. Today is another live C# with CSharpFritz episode. It's so good to see you. My name is Jeff Fritz, and we're going to be learning about Blazor today in this discussion-focused, open session, AMA style training that we're going to do, talking about building web applications and with the Blazor framework, building with C#. Look at that, my hat's a little bit crooked. There we go, that's better. And learning how to build and take advantage of the Blazor framework, this rich framework of tools that we have available to us that allows us to build on a server, build to run in the browser, and even a little bit of both. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. There's so many options that we have available to us. We're broadcasting live on both YouTube and Twitch. We're going to have about 40 minutes of AMA up front here, where folks are going to be able to ask questions. We're going to interact with chat, have a good discussion to talk about some of those things that are going on around web development, Microsoft technologies, answer your questions live right here with no filtering, no cuts. We'll be chatting away. Let me bring on the chat room. They're right over here. See that? They're hiding in the machine here with me. Let me say hello to our friends that are here bright and early getting us started. How you doing there? Failed to connect on Twitch. John Peters here on YouTube. Barry, good morning to you in Kentucky. Mr. Old Player, how's it going there? Eric is here on Twitch. Good morning to you. Cesar on YouTube. Hey guys, how you doing? Ricardo, good morning to you in Brazil. Hope you're having a great day. You like the hat riddle time? I have these made. So the Super C# logo is available. They're right. A number of the .NET Foundation logos are available for you to download if you want to make stickers, if you want to put them on websites, if you want to use them. There are limitations to how you can use them, but if you want to use them in different places to promote and show your support for the various .NET Foundation projects and the like. So there's also an F# logo just like this as well. I'm CSharpFritz, so it kind of makes sense for me to wear this one. So I have a couple friends that have embroidery machines, and I asked my good friend Georgia to make up one of these hats, these blue hats, right in the perfect Superman blue color. So you love C#, Cesar? You know, I have a number of folks that say they've bounced around between different programming languages, C#, Java, JavaScript, Go, Rust, and they keep coming back to C#. They keep coming back to it. It's a great middle ground that gets you really good performance, gets you all kinds of high-level optimizations and framework content that's built in, provided for you, that makes you more productive, makes you more efficient as a developer. And like, that's what I want. I don't want to be writing code all the time, but I want to be writing code that gets a job done, gets tasks done and delivered, and that makes me happy to deliver and complete a project. Let me get some music playing in the background here. This is Stream Beats by Harris Heller. This is music that's DMCA free. It's royalty free. You can listen to it wherever you'd like. And we're just going to have it chilling in the background here, kind of filling in the gaps as we chat and have a good time talking about tech. There we go. Big thanks to Harris Heller and his team of creators for making this music that we're listening to today. How you doing there? Is it Sinan in Istanbul? Hello, hello. DR on YouTube says C# is just pleasant to work with. Totally agree. There's a group of developers, a group of researchers that are always researching and trying to figure out what's the next cool feature that we need. How is the technology ecosystem moving so that we can decide exactly what we want to enhance our language with, right? Things are constantly changing, evolving. We've got new frameworks and destinations and hardware that we want to be able to deploy and run our code on. So it makes sense to be able to evolve our technology, our frameworks, our programming languages, so that we can target those new places. C# was started back in 1997, 1998, when we first started hearing about the project coming together. And when you think about that, there was no such thing as mobile development. IoT development was a glimmer. Nobody was really thinking about this cloud thing at the time. So to advance the technology, bring features that make it possible to target those other pieces of hardware, those other ecosystems. That's some great innovation we can get behind. Cesar says, started with PHP 12 years ago. C# has always been my love. You know what? I think there's something to be said about that. You know? The staying power of some of these languages and tools and frameworks that continue to get reinvested in, reinvented, new features regularly, really goes a long way. I think about the folks who are using Python. And when they made the change from Python 2 to Python 3, there was a significant schism? Sure. In that ecosystem from folks that didn't want to make the migration. I'm going to set a timer here for 40 minutes to get us started. And we will have a little bit of AMA, a little bit of open discussion for that time, because I'm going to go over to TagsApp so I can bring in some of the questions that you're talking about out there. Marcus with a good one there. And Horatio. So let's start going through here. And I've still got some messages up there from last time that we can reference and talk about. So let me head over to the main screen. We can start talking about some of this. So heading over, walking over to the big screen. Not really walking. I'm still sitting here. And there it is. So a couple messages that are coming through. I like this question coming in from Marcus. What do I think of smart components in MVC Razor pages and Blazor? So this is something very interesting that our friend Steve Sanderson, the gentleman who started and put the first prototypes together for Blazor, he started showing this concept of smart components. And it is quite interesting when you take a look at this. So you can find this at .NET-Smart Components. And there's a couple videos that you can find out on YouTube that show how these things work. But the idea is you have some rich bit of content that comes in, some text, and it'd be great if you could just have your form automatically break up that block of text. So here's somebody's address information, phone number, and whatnot. Be able to copy that and have your component be able to isolate and break that down into name, phone number, address fields appropriately. Very, very compelling stuff. The second one here is this idea of a smart text area where as you're keying in a response to something, let's say, it has information about the tone that should be used, policies that might want to be referenced in a text box, frequently used URLs. Maybe you're building some sort of a ticket triage system to respond and manage incoming messages, and to be able to get ghost text like that, like we see in Copilot. That's really cool stuff that you can now add to your application. I think this is very interesting. The last one down here is this idea of a smart combo box. So you have a series of items that you've listed in your combo box. We've been doing this with pizza toppings. But what this does is, as you key something in, it will find other things that might not necessarily be an exact match, but get you pointed in a direction that somewhat match what you're talking about. So they type in plane. Well, there is no plane, but there is travel and public transportation. Hospital, well, are you referring to health insurance or a charity? Maybe even car insurance. Really interesting stuff. I'm going to drop this link into chat on Twitch. It should get copied over to YouTube so that you can check out and learn more about these. You can use these in your MVC, Razor Pages, and Blazor projects. You need to hook up to an OpenAI or to an OpenAI endpoint. You can use Azure OpenAI. You can use your OpenAI subscription, and you can get in and use those. What do I think about them? I think it's a prototype that is very interesting, that will move us in the right direction for building smarter applications, right? Nobody wants to waste time keying things in when you can get something kind of solved for you, get a little bit of a machine helping you identify key data points and use them appropriately. I think there's significant opportunities to work with this. See a bunch more questions coming in over there. Let me see if I can grab some of these real quick. Hey, Carl. We're doing well. Chris Jones is here. Hello, hello. Yep, .NET 6 and above. Yep. What is that's a good question. I'll grab that one also. So let's dive back in here. Horatio says, I'm currently migrating an enterprise legacy .NET framework application to Blazor. Really enjoying the experiences. Thank you for the videos. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Horatio. I'm glad you're enjoying that. What kinds of challenges are you running into? And importantly, what things have been really easy to move forward? Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience there? I'd like to hear more about that so that we can hear the things that we've done well for you and figure out what we need to improve. So thank you for the comment. Sinan with a question here. How can we change the valid and invalid classes in validations? Bootstrap's classes are is invalid or is invalid. You know what? I haven't really dug into that too much. Let me open up a notepad here and let me take a look at that. Because I've always just relied on the valid, invalid classes in the input components. That's a pretty good question. So there's really good reference pages for those, and I don't think there's a property for it. But yeah. But I could definitely see that being a useful enhancement. Let's take a look at the source code. Like, right? That's something that's available to us. Right? So here's the ASP.NET Core source code. And let's do a search for input text. Sure. So there's the input text component. There's a base element to it, build render tree, blah, 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 blah. There's a CSS class. And, okay, so this inherits from input base. All right, so let's go find input base. And let's see. Current value is string, blah, blah, blah. So is there valid message store? Let's see what we got. Right? Like, I don't know. The source code's here. Maybe there's something that we can talk about. Here we go. Gets the CSS string that combines the class attribute with the string indicating the status of the field being a combination of modified, valid, or invalid. So attribute utilities, combine class names, additional attributes, field class. So there's a field CSS class here. Let's go find that. All right, can we find field CSS class? It's off of edit context. Okay. So what's edit context? Well, that's going to, here it is, edit context. Let's see. Yeah, I want to find that. No, we're gonna have to do a search. Is it hiding up here? Edit form? No, let's see if we can find it real quick. Edit context. Well, that's a field. There we go. There's the class. All right. So field identifier. Notify field changed. Mark as unmodified. Okay. This feels like something that might be get field state. So field state get value. Field states get value. Okay. So what if we take a look at field state? Can we find something on that? Like, walking all the way down this is so interesting sometimes. So field state, there we go. And validation messages. No, I would have to do some more digging. That feels like an interesting request to be able to, on the edit context, specify the CSS class that you want to apply. That's something. That's something that could be a potential feature that could be followed up on. I like that idea. So let me see here. Python can be challenging. Theirs was a bunch of libraries that allow different workloads. C# has NuGet libraries that get stuff done too. From C#, can you wrap calls to Python for something AI-ish? Yes. Yes, you can. There's a number of ways to bridge services. You can stand up an entire Python application, make calls into it from C# directly. You can also look at things like IronPython if you want to compile something and be able to reference and call it directly. Miran asks, what is the correct way of implementing internationalization for validation and generally for Blazor? So you're going to be looking at the resource strings that are available inside of .NET. This is another discussion that I should add as a feature here to this series. So when we talk about validation and we talk about internationalization, it actually refers to a key. When we get to the defining error messages, you can define the name of the key to look up in the internationalization resx files. And inside those, it'll grab the appropriate one for whichever language you're using. If you're using, if you're doing internationalization with WebAssembly, you're going to need to push those resx files to the client. And that can get dicey because you might be passing a bunch of resx files for a bunch of different languages. What I've found and where I've found some interesting success, there's a couple of open source libraries built by the community that will store internationalization instead of in resx files in JSON or CSV files. And we can use those, which are much smaller, and we can request only the ones we need from the server. And it would, because they're static files, they can be cached for a long time, send those to the client. So there's a bunch of content there. CSS class is determined by a field CSS class provider. Right, and how do we modify that? So I would have to do some more digging on that CSS issue. So I'm going to mark that, even though I'm not going to be... Yeah, there is no property. So maybe there's an opportunity to add a property. My hardest part with Blazor is choosing a component library, given Fluent UI a go after the latest Aspire preview, going down that path. What's my favorite component library? I've had great success with the Telerik libraries. I'm a long time... I used to work at Telerik, so I understand the way they design and think about their components. So it's a bias on my part, but I've had great success with them. Mud Blazor, a lot of folks use. Tried Mud Blazor, but you think for me, ideally smaller project, it all comes down to, right, how much time do you want to spend and how much do you want to load up components and ship? So they can get significant. You can call set field CSS class provider to set your own custom provider. I haven't tried that. Set field CSS class provider. Let's take a look at that when we get into the content later. That would be interesting to talk about. There is one for everybody's taste. You're right, Frank. How you doing? Hey, it's our friend Frank Boucher. Hello, hello. Coming back over here. Carl comments and says, I like this moderation tool. Did you write it yourself? Yes and no. This is a project. This is something that we've been working on, and I got a comment last week about this, and I'll call it out now in response to this on last week's video. Gosh, Fritz, you waste all of our time by only talking about the basics. What the heck are you doing? Why does Microsoft waste all this time just talking about stuff for beginners? You should really go and do something that's more advanced, more interesting for other folks to learn from. This is TagsApp. This is the application that we've been building on my live stream that you can learn all about. Actually, don't even do that. Go to tagsapp.net. And it'll route you to the GitHub repository right now. I'll drop the link in chat there. If you want to learn more, if you want to check this out. This is an open source application. This application you see me using over here, this is open source. You are welcome to download and try it out and write code and investigate and break it. We've used it we've tested it with the NFL kickoff. This is a Blazor application that has a series of providers that connect in to many different social media websites so that we can interact with them and bring their content into live streams like this, do analysis of what's going on out there. So we've got ways to pull messages out of Azure, out of a service called Blazor, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Twitch chat, Twitter. There is YouTube chat capabilities that need to be rewritten. They don't quite work well, but we're getting a good experience bringing things in using Restream. But everything's customizable. We can change this and make it look however we want. So I can make this dark green. Save that change. And I can use my keyboard properly and we'll get more of that information. I can load up images for the backside of these cards. More that we can customize in there. And this is something open source that we build on my live stream. You're welcome to download and check it out. You can follow me on YouTube, on Twitch, as we build this and discuss new features. And there's new capabilities that we're adding. But importantly, and where this is the advanced content, this is using a series of hosts under the cover. It's using a whole bunch of threading. There's many different types of Blazor interactions going here. We're using Bootstrap. We're using custom components that we wrote, like this modal dialogue. We're using all the features of the framework as much as we can so we can learn more about the framework. And It's battle tested and used live on streams like this one. And we've also used it during .NET Conf. So .NET Conf 2023, if you go back to the YouTube videos and you scroll through there, you can see some of the hosts. They've got a big screen, right, a Surface Studio screen that they're touching and interacting with this application. It's built with Blazor, and they're able to use it and respond and moderate and interact. So if you're looking for intermediate to advanced Blazor content, check out Tags app, the work we're doing in there on Tuesdays and Thursdays over on my channel. I'm going to start recording some summary videos of design decisions we've made, how this works, so on and so forth, so that folks can kind of catch up and also learn a little bit more about what we've built here. So, yep, fully open source. That's right, Frank. Thank you, Cesar. You thought you recognized it from .NET Conf? Yes, indeed. Robert. Sure. Last time I talked about Blazor state management, which method is, I think you mean best? Cascading parameters, injected state, MVVM, flux pattern. Is there anything newer to Fluxor in this field? I don't use the flux pattern. I don't. I'm going to use the stuff that's in the box. So I prefer and show and use cascading parameters, injecting state. I also load state from application state inside the browser, right? I want you in your browser to be able to save a little bit of state so that it remembers your preferences for next time you come back. So what do I prefer? Depends. Cascading parameters have a really good place, but when you use them, you can run into a little bit of a memory leak as it's passing the same references to the same object around to many different things. Injected state is kind of nice when you need to pass information into disjointed components that might not necessarily be referencing each other. Passing data into pages, like we saw last time. We're sharing data between pages as we navigate around the application. So that kind of makes sense to use it that way. But cascading parameters make sense to use when we have a parent page and we need to get data into the child components about the parent page or something the parent page is working on. So that's important to be able to do. So there isn't one that's best. There's places to use each that have their trade-offs, that have their benefits, that have their costs that we need to balance, we need to understand, and choose properly. And that's why I try to choose and show more of these as we go through here, right? And why I've made the point as we're building and writing some of the code as part of this series that we're not necessarily writing the most optimal code or the best code to do a task, right? We're writing something to show a feature. There are times that makes sense to use for that feature. When you look at and we talk about how that feature is implemented, I'll make it clear that this isn't the best way to do this. There are other ways that might be more interesting or compelling. When we showed the state of an order as it was changing because your order was being worked on, being prepared, and then out for delivery and then delivered, that the push of that state information would have been better delivered with something like Signal R instead of a timer that was pulling data, right? When it's trying to pull and pull for that data, while that does work nicely in some ecosystems and some technologies, you see that where folks have built, I think like the UPS website does this, if I remember, where it's polling an API and every 5 seconds it goes and gets a new value from that API. Well, that timer is fine. And when you navigate away, that timer gets clobbered, but you're making this polling and you're putting extra pressure on the server when it doesn't really need that. If you use a push mechanism with something like WebSockets, like SignalR does, that connection stays there and stays open, but there's nothing being sent across it. There's a little bit of memory that's being used to maintain that connection. And when you finally need it, you can push that one message across and disconnect at that point. Hey, we're done. There's nothing more to say here. That works nicely. So we'll get into those discussions around some of those topics. Let me jump back over here. Thought you recognized it. Yep. You like the C# cap? Thank you. So, what time do I stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays? Same time that I started today, 9 a.m. Eastern time, 1300 UTC. Thank you, Fail to Connect. Yep. Can we get AI smart components source code? How it was built? Without internet, it can work locally. The code's right here. Well, not the code, the library. I don't. If the source code isn't published, I can't imagine them. Well, running the samples. So, where can I find the source code? Haven't gotten clearance to open the code. So, Microsoft can't just blindly publish source code when we feel like it. There is a significant number of lawyers and folks that review and approve what can be published and what can't. There are always security reasons around how we publish source code, how we interact with that source code, because there are Microsoft customers that do not want source code published for the products that they use. So there are always concerns. There are legal reviews that go through before source code for things that aren't samples are published. So if it's published, great. If not, sorry. There's not much I can say about that. That is, there are smarter people than I that are talking about and going through those discussions. So, but evidently there are a number of people who are looking for the source code for that. Yep, not available. So, we've got about 15 minutes left of a Q&A time here. But how was it built? Any idea? Built with .NET. It's built with .NET. So it uses OpenAI endpoints to bounce data off of there. There's training routines that are available to you inside the components that you can take a look at how they're written, how they work, how to add them, and get it trained so that it does what you're looking for. So, smart paste button, styling, scope CSS, rendering an icon, customizing AI inferences. So, yeah, there's a whole add smart components and then inference backend that needs to be declared and interacted with. So that is a cool thing too. Yeah. Right? I mean, these aren't fully supported. This is an experiment. This is something that, hey, let's give this a try, see what we think about it. And if it's a good application, and hear what feedback we hear. You see these experiments from the .NET team, and they're not always fully open source. It's just a feature. What do you think about this? So you're welcome to download and try it out. So, hey, Steven, I'm doing well. Thank you for chiming in there on YouTube. Hello, hello. So, yeah, getting started with smart controls and smart components in Blazor. So add smart components. And now you can add, right, you need to configure OpenAI. So specify some points, get an API key, and away you go. So, might try these sometime, but for the work that I've been doing building this application, it's not something that I necessarily need right now, but might be fun to tinker with as we go through and talk about other features, other capabilities. So, I'm only covering the forms and validation session today because the next session coming up is the security session, and I've got a little bit of prep that we need to do for that session. There's a bunch that needs to be done that we're going to cover as part of that. So I want to make sure that I cover that properly, that I cover and deliver some of the concepts that you're looking for as we get into that. And the challenge with delivering a security session is always nobody has the exact same configuration. We can kind of take a shot and say, here's what a significant number of folks have. Here's a generic idea of how to set up and do these things. And when you need to plug in Azure Active Directory, local Active Directory, OpenID connections to various services. Well, here's where you do those things. But then the customizations that come with the authorization and passing roles, passing claims from those services, it starts to spider, and there's just not enough time to cover all of those topics and cover them to the depth that are really needed. And quite honestly, I think there's an opportunity for a series of streams that will dig deep on each one of those. And there was a series of security team, identity team live streams that did dive in and talk about those things. And quite frankly, I think they need to be not so much live streams as reference videos. So there's opportunities there. So you come on, pop the message across. There it is from the Restream bot. Let me grab that message from Steven. You gave up trying to get Docker running in WSL on Windows, running on it on Windows 11 ARM. Well, okay. Docker on Windows 11 ARM is not easy to set up. I got it running on my ARM device. Wait, hang on. You were trying to get... I didn't finish reading that. You were trying to get Docker running on WSL on Windows 11 ARM on an M1 Mac. Mac hardware. Windows running, I'm guessing, in parallels on that. Linux on top of that. Docker on top of that. You're virtualizing on top of virtualization on top of virtualization on top of virtualization. There's a point there where you've gone too far. Like, you're right. WSL virtual Docker virtualizes on top of WSL virtualized on top of Windows virtualized on top of a Mac. Like, there comes a point there where you've pushed too far. Like, you're using WSL1, which was the recommendation. I'm not sure how many people are trying to do that level. Like, why not just run Docker desktop directly on Windows at that point, which does work, and we did do, but you're running Docker on top of Windows, and you can access it from WSL, but you're at least limiting and taking out one of those levels of virtualization. You're really pushing that. Hypervising a hypervisor, yeah. It is turtles all the way down. I'll go to this comment from Genga. Did I scrape the comments, or what method did I use to get the comments from the platforms? I know YouTube has an API, but I haven't really looked at the docs. I tried using YouTube's API, and quite frankly, YouTube doesn't want you interacting with their service. They don't want you querying their service for chat at all. YouTube is not friendly to developers, period. They don't want you integrating with them. Yeah, look, you can do this. When you read the forms and the documents and that they've written, they are openly hostile towards you as a developer. I'm using Restream to get the YouTube comments pushed over to Twitch, and I'm pulling them from Twitch, where Twitch has an IRC endpoint I can listen to and receive comments. Google and YouTube do not want you interacting with chat at all. When you look at and you read how their API is built, they don't want you interacting with it. It might be expensive. It might be expensive for them. Then just prevent it and let me scrape it. Scraping is the way that I'm going to go with it, so that I can just have a browser window open somewhere that's echoing and sending messages into this. That's where I think we're going to end up going. It is the Inception movie all over again. Yeah, turtles all the way down. Did you know that I don't have any idea how to finish this sentence? What? Hey, Thindall. What? So, any idea how Restream.io does it? They went and got the full contract. They have an API contract with YouTube, so that's what they do. But to go through and submit for that, literally, you can't complete the form the way they have it built. You can't. They give you 50 characters to type in your design documents. There is a 50-character field for you to type in your design document. They give you a 10 meg upload to upload a video that shows how your application works. Your YouTube. Why don't I upload a YouTube video and give you a link to the video on your own service that you yourself can watch, because I think you know how to watch videos on YouTube. You have a project ongoing that uses Firebase and part of the docs are confusing? Yes. I am not speaking on behalf of Microsoft, but in my personal opinion, trying to integrate with Google services, all Google services, is extremely difficult as a developer. And some of those services, when you read the documentation, the tone is openly hostile towards you as a developer. That's my perception. That is not Microsoft policy. That is not a Microsoft statement. That is my perception of how to integrate with their services. And they've got fine services. I use a number of Google services all the time. We're broadcasting on YouTube, where we use a number of their services. We search with Google, and hey, they make some fine products. They can use some improvement in how they collaborate with developers to extend and add value to their services. Where can I load my app state from IndexedDB? IJS runtime isn't... Hang on. IndexedDB isn't really a thing anymore. IJS runtime isn't hitting my JavaScript function when injected into my scoped service. Okay, weaving Mocha. There is context and debugging that you're looking for here that I'm sorry I can't do over a live stream. If you want to share some of that code and that so that we can take a look and debug a little bit, you can post a message in my Discord. If you go to discord.csharpfritz.com, it'll give you a login prompt to join the Discord. There's a Blazor Q&A forum there. You can post a message with some source code. My initial guess here is you need to load app state. App state loads and JavaScript load doesn't run until after render. So you can't trigger that until the on after render event fires. Then you can interact and do that. That would be the first place that I would look, is how you are, which event you are triggering to go after that to try and load app state. You shouldn't be trying to use IndexedDB, right? I think browsers are not making that as much available. You can load app state from application storage or session storage. There are tools that will serialize that as JSON and place it as a string out there. The other thing to be concerned with when you think about saving and loading content from a browser and those storage spaces, if the browser has cookies disabled, if they've blocked cookies for your domain, for your website, you don't have access to write application storage, session storage, or cookies. You cannot write anything into that browser. You'll get errors when you try to write to it, and when you try and read from it, you'll get nothing coming back because the user has actively blocked you. So those would be the first 2 or 3 places that I would look. Without some source code, I can't give you too much of a response, but that would be my hunch. We're just about out of time here on the AMA up front. Let me grab just the last couple questions here, and we'll go through those. Sharafuddin asks, any Microsoft products that use Blazor with AI? What are they? Okay, so you're asking, are there any products that use Blazor with these components that we just published this week? There are all kinds of internal projects at Microsoft that do use Blazor. There are a number of products that do use Blazor. They're kind of, it's hidden under the covers. And the places, the places where we can talk about those projects, those products that do use it, is, I believe, where's the case study? Who uses .NET? There we go. There's a number of customers that are listed here that are actively using Blazor and .NET that you can go and check out. I don't think there are messages that we've actively shared about Blazor and Microsoft products for, once again, coming back to lawyers and legal reasons. We need to get approval before some of that stuff gets published. This is an interesting one. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, they use .NET and SQL Server. You can learn more about their stack there, because there's absolutely interesting things that you can see and they'll tell you about. Do they use Blazor in this one? No. Yeah, they use ASP.NET Web Apps on this one. I thought, no, it's not there. But you can check out the customer stories that'll tell you who uses what. So there's the customers link that have agreed to publish and share some of their information. So, but there are a number of these that do use Blazor that you can dig into and learn more about. but there are a number of Microsoft projects internally that are using it. And I'm not allowed to discuss if they haven't been published on that site. Sorry. So over here, Sarab, good to see me. Oh, thank you. Good to see you, Sarab. Appreciate you tuning in. Do I think it's a good idea to create a UI project, a Blazor front end, and back end API as separate projects? Initially, no. Because I want to, when I start a brand new project, I want to keep everything as tight as possible. I want to keep everything as small and unified in one location so that I can iterate and build one project and get it delivered and be able to debug and see how everything's working. ASP.NET is built in such a way that it's pretty easy then to pop out those APIs, move them into a separate project, and then build a little bit of connectivity so that you can do microservice type of architecture with those API services living somewhere else, making requests into them. You could then set up gRPC to do communication between those APIs and your UI. You can set up Open API if you'd like. You have a bunch of options available to you at that point, but I like to start, right, until I figure out and see how much I need to scale some APIs more than others and where those architecture bottlenecks are, where I'm going to be pinched for memory or processor. Put them all in one place. And then once I start realizing, oh, gee, this whatever accounting service with the business logic that's in it, gosh, it takes a lot of processing. We should move that into its own isolated process so we can put it in a Docker container and scale that up on machines that have more processors, or we can deploy more instances of that and load balance across those so we can get better responsiveness and being able to then allow my application to grow appropriately. I don't know those as an architect until I have concrete evidence. So I like to start having them in one project. Now, of course, in Blazor, when I do decide that I want to use Blazor with WebAssembly and Blazor server, well, even if I don't want Blazor server-side rendering or Blazor interactive, I need to separate out my Blazor UI components that are going to be delivered and run in the browser. We want that to be a separate DLL that's only those components so we can minimize the impact. Keep that as small as possible that we're delivering into the browser. That's a good thing. So we're okay. I'm okay with there being two Blazor projects. There was some work to try and make that one Blazor project and have it compiled differently so that WebAssembly content gets delivered appropriately and trimmed and linked appropriately so that it goes into the browser, and server-side stuff stays all put together and on the server. It was an experiment. I'm not sure how far they are. I purposely keep myself distant from some of that information so I don't accidentally leak things when I do AMAs like this. Customer might be a bit angry if you show their code on stream. Agreed. You can inject different implementations. Yes, absolutely. What is the recommended architecture for Blazor? That is such an open-ended question. Like, what's the recommended architecture for Windows Forms? What's the recommended architecture for Angular? Depends. What are you trying to do? Are you building a game? Are you building a game server? Are you building a enterprise application? Are you building an application that's going to be facing the open internet? Depends. What are you trying to do? There's lots of options. Once you get experienced and you understand how the pieces fit together, then you'll be able to plug it into your favorite architecture and take advantage of those capabilities. So, as an individual developer, what does that mean? I'm an individual developer building this. I don't really have an architecture that I'm following. I have a series of providers that I build, and you can see in the source code that interact with the various services. So it's not a named architecture. I have a facade that knows how to reach into each one of these that operates on a separate set of threads and interacts with and sends information back to the user interface that we can present and share. So, sure, you can use vertical slices. Absolutely. Yep. Let me go to this question from Coated Beard. Do I know of any examples of how to add B2C authentication to Blazor Azure static websites so that so we can authenticate calls to Azure functions? Can't find anything. So Azure static websites has authentication capabilities built into the function side of it. So Azure static websites. I'll just start with auth. And yeah, this. So if you want to use Entra ID for authentication, GitHub, there's information here about how to set it up. You end up with these endpoints for provider-specific routes, and you have login entries that go there. Azure Static Websites then picks up and does some of that authentication interaction and sends information back to you at that point. So that's directions how to do it. I haven't done this in a while, but can be done. And you basically hand off all the authentication to that. Entra ID, I think, is going to get you there with the B2C type of authentication that you're looking for. So, the smart component link, yeah, we shared that link a little bit earlier. So, all right. I think that's all. Does it only work once deployed, though? Doesn't work with local. No, it doesn't work with local dev. No. I don't think so. I haven't tried the emulator with that. So I would have to tinker and explore, but you're basically handing off the authentication to out there. So all right, I think we're about ready to dive into the code for today. I'm going to work in Visual Studio today. So, no, you know what? I'll leave those sites up. So we're going to work in Visual Studio today. The source code for the workshop, the workshop content that we're on, Blazing Pizza Workshop. This is where I'm scratch working on this. I'll share that link into chat. So it should go across to both YouTube and Twitch. There we go. You want to create a brand new Blazor WebAssembly app? Should I use the new or the old template? Use the new template. It's much faster, and you have a number of optimization capabilities available for you that I think you're going to prefer. Great example. Gosh, here I'm going to promote myself again. I wanted to build a piece of WebAssembly content. My C# in the cards website. This is Blazor. This is Blazor server-side rendered. However, the list of lessons down here, and this is all based on the first series we did here on this show, teaching the basics of C#. This is WebAssembly. All the interactions with this pager and the content below it, that's all WebAssembly. You don't have to wait for that to load, right? It isn't blocking content on this page. You get this ability to do pre-rendering and caching and display and have interactive content automatically with the new templates in .NET 8 with Blazor. Can you deploy WASM Blazor on static web apps with the new template? No, it's static. So you're sending all the Blazor into all of the Blazor WebAssembly into the browser. It doesn't work exactly the same. So, no. So I shared the link for this. I have the source code down here running locally. I'm actually going to walk back and check out where we left off after the state episode last time. And let's go up one here. And I'm going to start the solution file. And I'm going to kick off and have running out here the .NET Watch components. Why is that taking so long to start? Like, oh, there it goes. I'll have .NET Watch running out here so that we get instant refresh, hot reload happening in the browser for the application as we're building and working here. You don't need to stay with the old template. There is a newer version, but it's going to run effectively the same way. So, yeah, there we go. So some of the files still open from where I was last time. Let me, no, I want to close everything. And we'll dive into this. Let's show where we left off last time. So there are, I'll show it here. There are 4 projects, Blazing Pizza Client, Component Library, and Shared, that make up this project. Blazing Pizza is our entry point. This is the server component of the application, the web server component. So when I run .NET Watch here, it's going to start that up. It's going to package all of our components, all of our references, and make those features that are necessary to run in the browser for WebAssembly, make them available and deploy them into the browser. And I get my Blazing Pizza website. So where we left off last time, we added the ability for state management here so that I could do things like put together an order, click around and see, well, here's my older collection of orders that we've placed. Go back to my pizza and it still remembers my order here, right? It still has that state, that shopping cart that you see here saved in memory so that we can interact with it. And there's options for where you may want to store that. You may want it to be, can I shrink that browser just a smidge behind me? Hang on. Yeah, you. No, I can't. No, it's not going to work. Right? Right, this is... Right, let's see, what can I do here? Right, you don't get this type of live update of the video anywhere else. It's a feature that's only available here on my streams. Right, push that up there a little bit, and let me see if I can shrink and get just a little bit more. I don't mind if you see my taskbar, that's okay. There we go. And that's better. Now you can see the whole browser here. Okay, so what this will... So it remembers our state, and there are other places you can store state. Because I'm using an in-memory state object, when I refresh the browser, it's going to forget. That's something to be aware of. There are other places that you can store state of your application. We mentioned a few of them earlier. Application storage, session storage in the browser. But you need to be granted write access to them. Now, by default, browsers will let you write into those storage locations. You can, by default, do that. However, if a user has blocked your website from storing cookies, you will not be able to do that. What happens if the connection is lost when you're in the middle of an order? Does it still retain state? In this case, because this is WebAssembly and it's running in the browser, if we lose connection, right? So if the application stops and then restarts, right? I can still, right? The application just restarted, but I can, right? Click out, come back, and it still remembers it because I'm storing it in memory browser side, right? That's important to know. Where storing things in application and session storage then becomes even more valuable is if you do lose connection, if it's a mobile device, if it's a tablet, if not only they lose connection, but right, they lose the application, they have to restart. Well, it's saved on disk on the device, and you have an opportunity to load that back. The question is, how resilient does your state need to be? You can go even further and push this state to the server and have it saved somewhere on the server, right? We all go to Amazon.com to buy books, to buy kitchen widgets and supplies. I buy cables for putting together and managing my home studio here. But when you go there and you put things in your cart, it's not storing that in memory or in your browser. They're storing it server side, and then they do other things with that data to recommend other products for you based on what's in your cart. So this comes back to a little bit of that architecture question that we had earlier. Where do you want to store your state? Depends. Where does it make sense for you to store your state? Because you might have other business decisions you want to make to add value for your customers. So it's a great question, Stephen. Thank you for asking that over there on YouTube. And there might be a combination of those that makes sense for you. So things to keep in mind, right? And gosh, if we store our state, our list of what's in our cart on the server, well, that means I can also do things like send a message to my parents. Hey, Mom and Dad, we're ordering pizzas tonight. Why don't you come over? Is there a pizza that you want to add to the cart? And they can do that on their phone. I can send them a link, and they can add that to my cart from their phone, and I can finish and place the order. There's interactions like that that become possible when we decide where to move our state around to. But I'm showing just the in-memory state right now so that you get just a taste of what you can do with this, okay? So, really good stuff there. Thank you. I like diving into that conversation. The next pieces that we want to build are when we place the order. And at this point, when we clicked place order, it actually just went through and said, okay, your order's placed. How do you know where to send that? Like, I didn't tell you where I live. Like, you might know where I live. You might know where I want to have that pizza shipped to because I've told you previously, but I need to tell you. How do we do that? How do we give our application some input information? Not just clicking around on a menu over here, but some additional information, right? That text capture of things like my customer name, address, and so forth. And this is that classic problem that we've always got to deal with, we've always got to solve. Did I lose my other browser? Nah, there it is. Okay. So we're going to go through and we're going to add a checkout page along with the ability to key in address information as we're going along here, okay? So let me move my content around here so that I can see everything. Fantastic. So I want to add a checkout page. Let's start doing that. Here we go. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio, and I'm going to introduce a checkout page. Now, my orders, my order details, we built those to run server side last time, and that worked out okay. So let's start out with building and adding this server side. So I'm going to add Razor component, sure, and I'm going to call this checkout.razor. All right, so that we can capture that information, including the delivery address, right? If we look at our order down here, right, our order has a delivery address. So I want to be able to capture that address information and pass it along to our delivery people so they know where to ship the pizza, where they're driving their bike to, right? And so on and so forth. So let's start building checkout Razor here. So I want this to answer, it's going to be a page, and we're going to answer on /checkout. That kind of makes sense. That's easy to find and place content. I'm going to put some content on that page. So I'll just paste in a little bit of HTML to get us started here. Blazing Pizza Checkout will be our page title. We're going to have our order review component that shows, we saw this last time. I'll F12 into that shows the list of pizzas and toppings that are on the order, as well as the total price. So that's okay. I need to get my order state in here, and I need to know how to place that order. So I need to inject some information here, like that order state. So let's inject order state, and I'll just call it order state. Thank you, Copilot. There we go. In order for me to place the order, I need to inject. We've been calling it the repository object here, so I'll inject a repository object, and right, that's been set up so that I can directly access things with Entity Framework when it runs on the server, and I can access it using HTTP requests and APIs when I'm running in WebAssembly. So I have those two objects available to me. I'm also going to need my navigation manager, so that when, there we go, thank you. So that when I'm done keying in all my information and I click place order, it routes me to the order details page about that. So on my, right, we had the place order component sitting on my home page, and that's sitting down here in Blazing Pizza Client. So I'm going to reach in here and I'm going to grab that place order method. I'm going to yank it from there, and we'll create a code block here. Paste that in, and it knows how to, we'll rename that to repository. Thank you. So my repository object knows how to place orders, and it's going to pass through the current order that we're looking at here. Okay, I need to update over on the home page, because now we don't have a place order that's happening here, and this button that's submitting and placing the order. I'm going to change that to an anchor, so that it's just an order button that when you click it is just navigating to the checkout page. So there's a CSS class here that is disabled if the count of pizzas that you're ordering is 0, and it'll just jump through appropriately. Okay. That's not too bad. I can work with that. So save that, and if I go back over here to my page, and I'll put together some kind of reference, and I'll shrink the browser just a little bit so you can see the order there behind me. A little bit more. A little bit further over. The order button looks exactly the same, right? So that makes me feel good that it looks exactly the same. Let me make sure that everything rebuilt. I think that should work. So I'll click order, and it didn't rebuild. I didn't save things properly. So save that. Let's. Oh, I only did a .NET run. I didn't do a .NET watch. Do a .NET watch. We want this thing to update as we're going along here. So, right, that's being put together. Sure. Right, started. There's my new browser. All right. So let's put together a pizza here and yeah, put some hot peppers on it. There we go. Place the order. Now, it rounded to my checkout page. It's got the appropriate title up there. Blazing Pizza Checkout. You can see it real tiny. But my order didn't come through. What happened there? That's weird, right? Mark has a question on YouTube about the terminal I'm using. This is Windows Terminal. You can, and I have a configuration on top of this called Oh My Posh that gives me the power lines that you see down here. You can download my configuration and instructions for how to configure yours, including my little Fritz and Friends wallpaper. That's available also. Check it out in my .files repository. github.com/CSharpFritz/.files, DOT files. And you can find the instructions for this. So my order didn't flow through here. Why? Right? Like this should have come through. I passed my order state. Here's the deal. If we look at the code that we have over here, that order state is on the home page. It's being created and managed on the home page, which is happening in the browser. Remember, the order state object we created is an in-memory construct. So when we're rendering content on the server, it doesn't have access to the things that are in memory in the browser. So if we want to continue to use this in-memory interaction to create and manage that state, which kind of makes sense to manage and run in the browser so that should something happen to the server, right, if it goes offline for a few seconds, you can still have a great experience reviewing and placing orders for pizza. I'm going to move my checkout then to the WebAssembly side so that it's available and has the content that's being managed in the browser. So I'm going to go into my pages here on the server, remove that, and now it's only available down here on the client, okay? It's still listening at /checkout. It's still using the same repository interface, but remember, I have an implementation that we talked about previously. I have an implementation of my repository that uses HTTP client to go and fetch and work with that. And our place order method here works with HTTP client to post the order to an API endpoint. We reviewed all of that kind of plumbing last time. So if I go back to my checkout page, now that it's on WebAssembly side, I'm going to force this to rebuild so that we can go through this process again and start building out a little bit. There it is. It's running over here. I'm going to do a refresh. So if I have a cheese pizza, we'll put some basil on it, some bell peppers. Let's put some American bacon. And I'll click to place that order, and I don't have any content here. Where did it go? Where is it? Here's what I've seen. You need to do a little bit of a .NET clean, because there's things that are linked and hanging out there that didn't quite clean up when you move things like that. And it's answering on the same location. We need to kind of force it to relearn where things are. So let's try this one more time. And I'll just put a simple pizza in there, and I still don't have it. And now Fritz is going to look at this and go, what did I miss again? I thought I had this. I thought I had this. Checkout, order state, repository, navigation manager. there was something I did. I'm going to cheat for a second and go back to my source code, because I've already got this written. And this was particularly something I wanted to show and be like, oh, look, there it is. So components, pages, checkout. Oh, I remember what I forgot. So this component is sitting here, and it doesn't have the things that are running WebAssembly side. We have to also tell it that we want it to run on interactive WebAssembly. So I'll key that in. It's going to attempt to hot reload. If I go back over here and let's add a pizza. No, we need to rebuild there, friend. You're missing it. Right? With great power comes great responsibility. The flexibility to move things around. We need to remember to include that when we want to declare things. So I'm just going to add bacon to this, and now we've got the data. All right. So what did we learn? By default, things run on the server because I don't have a render mode declared globally. They're declared per page. Because we're storing state in memory of the browser, if we want to access and work with that state, we need to run content in the browser then. We can do things to push that state back and forth between the server and the browser. There are options available to you, persistent session storage, persistent local storage, that you can use to do some of those things to store and persist in the browser beyond just the current page that you're looking at, right? Beyond the current refresh and memory instance of the application you're working on, right? This is just like storing data in a variable in a JavaScript script that's running on the page, right? Same type of in-memory persistence. But now, because I moved my checkout page to run on the client and I added render mode interactive WebAssembly, now it's running in the browser and bringing that content back. Okay. So we have a checkout page, that intermediary page that's going to allow us to review our order, but we also need to capture the delivery address where we're going to send this to. So let's create another component that will be our address editor to bring back that type of content. So inside my components folder here, I'm going to, on the client, I'm going to add address editor .razor, and we'll build out a little address editor here. We don't want a header on there. Now, because this component is going to be referenced on the checkout page, it will, that interactive WebAssembly rendering is going to filter down and make sure that the address editor runs in the browser as well. So I want to be able to capture the address that we're working with. So let's take in a parameter. It's required. You need to give me somewhere to store and work with the address you're specifying. And it will be a regular C# property of type address called address, and we're just going to initialize it if there isn't one provided. The address is sitting here in this shared class library down here that has a number of other classes that are those business objects we want to be able to share between client side and server side to make it easier to work with these things. So nice and small, just a couple of objects that we can work with. So we have this address, and it's a typical address you might see in any application. So let's put together those different form fields that we need for this. And I'm just going to copy these in from the notes in the project. So we have name, line 1, line 2, city, region, postal code, and then there's our address at the bottom. So let's put that on our checkout page. So on the checkout page, so There's our order details right here. Right next to that, I'll add a block for the delivery address with a little header up top, deliver to. There's our address order, and it's going to take the order that's currently in our order state, and our in-memory storage, and grab that delivery address field out of the order and specify that's the address we're working with, right? Remember, in .NET, we can pass around classes. They're reference objects, right? We have reference types and value types. Because this is a class, right? An order is a class and the delivery address is a class. Because we're passing that delivery address, that class object, it's a reference. So the address editor gets a reference to that address class. And it will be updating, going up the chain, it'll be updating our order appropriately and the address associated there. Will the review order allow you to make changes to the pizza, etc.? No, we don't have that as part of this tutorial. You certainly could add those features. That might be an interesting step to try and take to test yourself and add additional features. You could certainly do that. Yes. But when I save that and let this update, oh no. Address editor, address, it's not saved. Yes, we need to restart now because I've broken it. Here we go. And now I have my address field, and because I broke the application in hot reload, it forgets all the things. So now, to your question, Stephen, if I wanted to edit the order, well, I could just go back and edit my order on the homepage, right? So I do have that option to kind of go back and forth. But if you wanted to add the ability to remove toppings here or remove pizzas, or maybe add a coupon code, that might be interesting to as a next step in your exploration working with this tutorial to try and integrate and see how that works. So let me finish showing you what we're going to do with this address editor here. All right. So very simple set of fields there, and I can start keying in whatever I want here. Right. Sure. Springfield, Illinois, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no validation on these, right? It's just kind of out there. And we want to be able to validate and ensure that this is delivered and adheres to some basic standards that our address has and how we work with it. So, first piece we always want to make sure we do is, of course, add server-side validation, right? At the end of the day, your server isn't going to be tinkered with by your customers, by the folks that are interacting with your website. So to be able to modify and add validation into your server is going to give you protection from any kind of bad data that might be attempting to get through. Our controller, our orders controller, has been decorated with this API controller attribute. So when we do place order here and it's receiving an order, that API controller attribute for all of the decorated methods inside of our controller, it's going to do a little bit of model validation for us. And that model validation is something that we can go after and enhance using the data annotations capabilities that are built into .NET. So data annotations are a very powerful feature that allow you to decorate properties with validation rules that are appropriate not just for in the browser, but also for scaffolding and working with your data store. Entity Framework takes advantage of some of these same annotations to build and design and architect database tables for you. So you'll have the same requirements inside the database that you have on the front end user interface using the exact same annotation, and you don't have to write any code to enforce it. That's pretty powerful stuff. And we can customize that and do interesting things with that, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that in just a second here. Let me go to High Tech Redneck on Twitch asks, why do we almost never update the city state when the postal code is entered? That's a excellent point. Right now, this is a dumb editor. It doesn't know the relationship between city, region, and postal code. There are lookup tables out there that are available where, you know what, if somebody does key in a postal code, maybe we prompt for that first because we can derive the city and region appropriately from them, right? I key in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I can tell you right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not in Illinois. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is somewhere in the Northeast. So there are intelligent capabilities that you can add with that. Build in an API so that when you key that in, it goes and identifies appropriately. You can absolutely do that. We're just making this a simple interaction for now for the tutorial. So thank you for the question. But that absolutely, there's another cool feature that might be fun to add to create a postal code lookup combo box. We talked about smart components earlier. Maybe there's a postal code lookup combo box that we can build and publish and make available so that when you do key in a postal code for a given country, it will look up that country's postal code table and give you the appropriate city region information. Sure, there's an opportunity there to build and integrate something. And I would challenge you, based on some of the things that we've learned, there's another interesting place to continue and extend this tutorial and try something different. So I'm going to add some data annotations for these fields to do things like, well, I need to know what your name is, you know? So I'm going to add a required attribute over here, this annotation, and I'll include the appropriate using statement for it. System component model data annotations. This is available with .NET. All versions of .NET that are available, that are fully supported, have this capability. Doesn't matter if you're on .NET Framework, .NET Core, .NET 6, 7, or 8. This is available for you to work with. And I can do things like decorate and say this is a required field. And I want to specify that it has a max length of 100 characters. I don't want you keying in a name that's gigantic here. Most folks only need 100 characters for their name. I know there are some people that have longer names, but 100 characters is enough so that I know to go and knock on the door of Mr. Fritz and go and prompt for and deliver the pizza. Hey, Mr. Fritz, I've got your pizza here for you. So, don't most model apps cache some of the common details for entry? Like when you put in orders, it recalls your address. How does that work? Browser, it'll do. So that's not browser local storage. That's actually your browser will remember your address information. So, and I'm purposely using features and things here that don't show mine. So I'll add some max length entries here. Thank you, Copilot, for helping with that. City, well, it's not just max length, but I want to make sure we need to know what city you're in. Yeah, I think that's about right for the region. It's required and max length 20. Postal code, you're going to suggest one for me there, Copilot? Look at that. Required, max length 20. That works for me for the postal code. So I've added those attributes there. So now, because of the order controller, why aren't you finding that? There it was. Right? The orders controller, because it has this API controller up here, it will reject orders that don't have, that are missing some of that data, right? So if I click place order here, I get an error has occurred. Well, what error occurred? Well, it's, right, I got an error coming back from the server. JSON value could not be converted. And when I look at the network, right, right, I got a 400 error coming back from that. Bad request. One or more validation errors occurred. So the server is blocking if I forgot to include a required name field. And that's nice, and I can do things to kind of surface that error information if I want to. But really, I want to be able to catch some of that information client side. I want to be able to catch that before you even get there, right? So we can add validation into this with some of the built-in Blazor validation components. Particularly, we're going to use something called the edit form. So I'll go back to my checkout page, and where I was setting up the checkout page here, I'm going to add an edit form component. This is built into Blazor, real easy for you to reference. And I'm going to specify that we're going to, the model that we're working on that we want it to validate is the order state order, particularly the delivery address. And I'll go down here. No, I didn't ask for that. There we go. It should be, oh, it's after the button down there, that one. That's where we need to put it. Okay. So we're going to tell it to review and inspect and give us information about that order. And I want it to validate those data annotations. So I'm going to add an entry here for the data annotations validator component, right? This is what's going to tell the edit form, hey, I inspected the object, the model, the delivery address here, and applied validation for all the data annotations that are in it. So the delivery address is an address. It's going to inspect and apply validations appropriately for all of these attributes, okay? And validation summary is going to list those errors from the validation. Piece of cake. Now, we need to do just one or two more things here. This button that on click is calling place order, well, we're not going to be calling it from there. And we're going to change this into a submit button. Instead, we're going to place the order when we have a valid delivery address and the submit has taken place. There's a couple of methods, a couple of event handlers on this that you can interact with, like on invalid submit. So if you tried to submit and it was invalid, maybe there's some cleanup tasks that you need to do. Or maybe you want to put some other error information on the screen. You want to handle it differently. Whatever your business logic is, you can do that here and interact with it. So on valid submit, we're going to go and call place order. And place order is down here. That's an asynchronous task that's going to go and do that. Crossbow on YouTube asks, I want async form validation. That is, right? That is an event callback. An event callback is asynchronous. So it's going to trigger this and do whatever you need to do. So you've got that. So now when we go through and we look at interacting over here, if my name isn't on there and I click place order, now I get in my validation summary that I added down at the bottom, I get this generic "the name is required" message output there in this typical red text formatted there. And there are ways to change up the template. of how this is formatted and displayed down there. You can see that in the documentation of the validation summary component. We can change some of that text if we want that to appear differently, right? So if we look at the required attribute here, look at it's already giving me some of the entries here. I can specify the error message. There was the question about internationalization. I can specify the error message resource name, and that's the key that it's going to use to look up the appropriate translation for that message inside of resx files or whatever library you might be using to do that translation for you. So I'll add here, error messenger is what should we call you, right? And that just reloaded. So I'll click. I'm gonna have to do a. Oh, it's gonna make me. It's gonna make me right. And if I click place order, yeah, it still has the same message. I'm gonna have to refresh, and I'll lose my information. What should we call you? So now that information is coming back through here, and we can get this appropriate information, right? Appropriate, not just the standard message that's output here. You can customize it however you'd like for your application. Eric on Twitch asks, can you have the validation colorize the form field needed? Spoilers. That's the next piece that we wanted to address here. So if I want to add that information, I can, I want to also put those validation messages. Let's do this part first. I want to add those validation messages right next to my, 1 second. Yeah. If I want to add those right next to the fields so they're not hanging out down here, I can add validation messages right next to the fields. So I'll put right next to my input here a validation message. Thank you. And I'll do that appropriately for each one of these. Oh, it's not going to auto-complete these for me. Fine. I will copy and paste for the win and just change this to line 1. Change that to line 2. It's interesting. Copilot, nope, isn't picking up that, hey, look at what Fritz is doing. Let me complete these. So, finish that one. And I'll update. There we go. So now, not only do I have the messages down there in the summary at the bottom, but now they're right next to the appropriate fields. But to Eric's question, well, how do you customize these? And that leads a little bit into the question we had earlier about wanting to be able to change these classes. So these are just standard HTML inputs. We can add, just like we had navlink that adds extra capabilities, we can update these to the input text type. And we're going to bind the value there. I'm going to do the exact same thing for all of these. Not bind text, bind value. Right? And it will bind as a value that value, right? That line 2 or the city name here as the value of that text box. There we go. This is the important part where you really enjoy watching Fritz type. So now I get a little red outline around them that indicates these are invalid. So that red outline, when we mouse over it, comes from it's been decorated with an invalid class. Okay. Now, that yeah, that's okay. That's easy for us to pick up and triage and do something over here. Now, there was a question earlier. Gosh, I'd really like to make that some other value. And the resolution we heard was, well, there's a set field CSS class provider method. Let's do a quick search for that. So we can specify and change that here. Okay. So there's the edit context, right? Which is the context of the component of the form that it's working on. And it's working on this model object and being able to pass in another provider to work on that specifies, well, here's the field. So it looks like that's an appropriate solution for this. I've only got about 10 minutes left. Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this real quick. So there was the comment that we had earlier was the bootstrap classes is valid and is invalid. So let's try adding that. Like, why not? Right? You don't get this anywhere else. This is the advantage of the live coding fun that we do here on the stream. So let's add a class here, and I'm going to call this bootstrap field class provider. And right, it's going to be something like this. And if it is valid, what was it? What's the bootstrap class? Bootstrap is valid. Is that the class name? Invalid, valid, was validated, is dash valid. Right, and then is dash invalid. Okay. So we need to turn that into context on our order page. This is interesting. So instead of just having a model, because we want to interact with more of the context of what's being edited here, I'm taking that out. And I'm going to specify edit context equals, and I'll call this my edit context. So we need an edit context, and I'll call it my edit context. Nope, can't do that. But thank you. My edit context equals new edit context order state dot order, and set field class CSS provider. Oh, it was right there. It was right there. Come on, friend. New bootstrap field class provider. So with that in play, let's see how our application updates. Right? So now if I click place order, now I get, nope, it's still using invalid. Oh, it didn't restart. That's why it didn't restart. We'll let that rebuild, and then we will call this. So there we go. Doesn't have an order yet, so let's put some pizzas in the cart. Place order, and something not quite there. Yeah, the JSON, right? I'm getting the error from the network, the 400 over there. So it didn't catch locally. Right? What did we miss? Right, so one valid submit, yeah. I don't know what it missed. edit context on valid submit, and it has the validations down there. Huh. Yeah. Nope. I'm not sure where it's missing that, because it's clearly calling into here. Right? Nope. It hot reloaded, and it's still not. No, it's still not hitting it. Something with that edit context, it's not picking up. I'm going to do some digging on this, and I will have it updated for us next time. Let me, because I'm right at the end of time here, but I know there's ways to make that work with edit context. Order state, order, delivery address. Actually, wait a sec. Because that's not the right object that should be passed in as the order. That's why. It should be order state, order, delivery address. That's why. Did that... It says it hot reloaded. Nah, it still didn't pick it up. Give it one more try. I was referencing the wrong order. There we go. So you see it has the is invalid bootstrap class attached to it. And evidently I don't have those available for me to go for them to be attached here. But the is valid invalid default entries are there. Do it again. And it highlights with the appropriate entry there. And when I key in values, it changes it to valid, and that it's been modified, so we get a green border on it in this case. Let me do some more tinkering with that and add some information about that set field CSS class provider. And we can talk more about that next time. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. This has been a lot of fun. Always great to talk through and go through the various pieces of the Blazor framework. And I don't work with all of these things all the time, every day. So sometimes I do get caught with features, extensibility points that I haven't worked with. So I learned something new today, too. And that feels good. Campo with a question here. How just entered the stream. Is there a place where I can find the start of the stream and older videos? Absolutely. Go over to youtube.com/.net. Check out the C# with CSharpFritz series. All right. That's all the time that I have for today. There's other folks coming up. There's more videos coming here live on the Visual Studio Twitch channel, on the .NET YouTube channel. Lots of great content from Microsoft, from the Visual Studio team, from the .NET team, as they teach you more about technology and all the cool stuff that we have building and coming with new versions of .NET, with new AI tools, with new Visual Studio versions, with Azure capabilities, with .NET Aspire. It's growing. We're getting lots of new things here. This is the place to tune in to hear the folks that build and work on those things tell you more about them as they're getting ready to release, as the preview versions are coming out. All right? Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you. If you're watching on YouTube, check out some more of the videos we have on the .NET channel. There is an entire collection of these videos in this series available. This discussion-focused interaction teaching about all the things C# Blazor that you can tune in and find. There's all kinds of other introductory videos available. Check out learn.microsoft.com and you'll find some great content there. Tutorials, some hands-on walking through content that we've written for you that we think are pretty beneficial. And for those of you that are watching on Twitch, it's time for a raid. Let's see who else is streaming on the big Twitch TV network that I can get you connected to that's doing something interesting out there. You know what? I think we're going to go over to our siblings channel here. We're going to go over to the Microsoft Developer channel where they're talking about using generative AI to get your startup together. So let's set up a raid for those folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back on my channel tomorrow working on TagZap. You saw me use it earlier today. It's an advanced Blazor application, completely open source, that we work on to add new features and build new capabilities. I'll be back here next week talking about security as our next topic, authentication, authorization, as we're building our Blazing Pizza website. But I want to make sure you tune in Friday at this time, 11 a.m. Eastern. What is that? 1500 UTC on my channel, youtube.com CSharpFritz, Twitch TV CSharpFritz. We're going to have a community-led event called Modern.NET Web Day. We're going to be talking about architecture. We're going to be talking about Blazor features, OpenAI, and how you can use that in your .NET applications. We have some conversations about GitHub Copilot we're going to go through, and we're even going to learn a little bit about .NET Aspire. So check that out. Tomorrow I broadcast on my channel, 9 a.m. Eastern, 1300 UTC. Friday, I'll be broadcasting and we'll be hosting that Modern.NET Web Day on my channels at 11 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC. Let's go raid the Microsoft Developer channel there on Twitch. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.